Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always, here to recap the last week of college basketball and preview the next week of college basketball. Greg, we have a ton to talk about tonight. Just a lot of games played, a lot of news outside of the sport. How are you feeling, though?
I don't. The sport is crazy, Joe. I made a comment a couple weeks ago. Like, I just wish teams would let us know if they're good or not, and just stay in. And then you correctly said, "No, Greg, I don't think you'd love the sport as much if it wasn't as crazy as it is." And you're totally right. And we got a lot to talk about, so we might as well jump right into it. But there's some breaking news from today that we should at least bring up before we get into the actual games and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. So we mentioned last week, and Greg even texted me outside of the show of the, hey, nothing's going on this week. I really hope Saturday pans out for us. And it did. It did. There was enough to go over on Saturday for probably two full podcasts. But we're going to try to do our best to get through it again. So as a reminder, we're doing a new format now, so we're going to go top stories and kind of go through the top stories in the sport, and then do more of a lightning round with everything else that we missed, that we talked about maybe last week, and kind of go through all the games and what happened after that. So to start things off, we have Leonard Hamilton said he's resigning after the season from Florida State. Now, something that we had hinted at before, Greg, just that the ACC was changing, the Jim Larrañaga news, I think we even said then, it was just like, hey, this guy's getting older as well. The program's not doing as well. But just an awesome career for him, for the success he had. I think he was 456 and 190 or 290 at Florida State. That's just top of my head, just from looking at it earlier. But that's incredible work he did there to get teams to play well at a school that was not known for basketball at all, that did not care about basketball. He did a lot with a little, and I mean, even had number one overall seeds, which, you know, is probably even harder to do than, not number one overall seeds, number one seed, I should say, but probably even harder to do than just going on a miraculous, 4-game run and making a Final Four. It's just really cool for him, for the job he did. I'm sad to see him go, but this ACC, Greg, we talked about it, not the same as before with how many good coaches we've seen leave in the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, I remembered seeing John Rothstein tweeted out. So here's the list. Now, this doesn't just include retirements. This also includes coaches that have taken jobs elsewhere. But Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Rick Pitino, obviously St. John's now, Boeheim, Tony Bennett, Mike Bray, Buzz Williams, obviously Texas A&M now, Larrañaga, and now Leonard Hamilton. I mean, that is so much coaching experience and so much coaching talent. And if you want an idea of how long Leonard Hamilton has been coaching, so Leonard Hamilton didn't just coach at Florida State. He was also at Miami before, and I cannot, now I'm blanking on the other school that he was at before. Was it, do you know off the top of your head? But anyway,
Yeah.
I'll keep going with my point while you look that up. So Miami, the year that he took over Miami, they were not in the Big East. They were an independent. That same year was the last year that the U.S. International Gulls men's basketball team fielded an NCAA Division I team. So that's how long Leonard Hamilton has been coaching basketball. That's a long time. So we always like everything you hear about the guy, with the exception of, obviously, there was some funny business this year about the NIL stuff, but you always hear about how great he is and how wonderful he is. And, Joe, you didn't mention this, so I'll mention it. The one thing is that COVID season, they were a top 5 team in the sport, them and San Diego State and, a couple other teams, Dayton and Kansas. It's like that season for them, probably means just as much as it does, if not more, to UD fans and whatnot, because there was, like, the UD thing was fun, but I think when you looked at that Florida State team, you kind of looked around and you said, yeah, they could actually make a Final Four or even possibly win this whole thing. I mean, and the season just stopped. So would have loved to see him get a Final Four before he retired. Definitely going to go down as one of the better coaches never to make it, but still a darn good career.
Yeah, I think the peak of some of his powers were maybe, I would say, 2016-17 season through that canceled COVID year, Greg. But they did have an Elite Eight in that run. They did have number one seed in that run. That is again, just really impressive for a school that didn't have much of a basketball history. He also coached at Oklahoma State earlier in his career. He coached for the Washington Wizards in the middle. The thing that I remember was just reading about, obviously wasn't alive for this, but he was an assistant at Kentucky from 1974 to 86. So that would have been a little bit with Adolph Rupp, a little bit with Joe B. Hall, but just I mean, he what a good starting point to go from Kentucky and then getting the Oklahoma State job in 1986.
Bad memory. If you remember, you know what I'm about to bring up. One reason we shouldn't like Leonard Hamilton, you and I.
I know what you're bringing up. Yeah.
Xavier was a 1 seed and got beaten in the second round by Florida State, and I was very sad because I thought that team had something and could have done something. So,
but
good riddance.
But the year before, Xavier beat them in the second round, I believe.
That's
so,
true. That's true.
Each tip for a tat there. But yeah, we'll miss Leonard Hamilton in this sport. We'll miss a lot of these coaches, and it is sad that we are getting older, Greg. So we will keep on hoping that maybe he gets some big wins down the stretch, because I would love to see some upsets by him, or maybe another ACC tournament run. Don't know if this team has what it takes to make an NCAA tournament run, but it'd be really cool to see that. Going forward for Florida State in his last year.
With the way this year has gone, Joe, we're going to see a Miami-Florida State ACC title game in the ACC tournament. That's what we're headed for. Just wait.
Yeah, every year we see like one ACC team go on a run in the tournament. Like even some years, like Boston College will win like 2 games or whatever. We just want that to be Miami and Florida State this year. Obviously, we saw NC State kind of go on a miracle run last year that started in the ACC tournament, but we would love to see that from one or both of those teams. That'd be really fun to see for those last year's coaching. I guess Jim Larinaga not there anymore, but still would be cool to see that as a team he still supports. All right, Greg, let's get into the other top stories, the ones that we maybe more expected after this week of college basketball. We will start with Kentucky losing at home to Arkansas. This was a big story in the sport because John Calipari made his return to Rupp Arena. It was, I would say, a game that had a lot of energy in the building. They said it was one of the best Rupp Arena atmospheres they've seen. This is a game where he is booed. All the former players at Kentucky that went there with him are booed. Even Tyler Eulis, the former Kentucky player, is not an assistant coach there, was booed. But Arkansas gets the job done, and it was honestly a way that they had not played this year. It was shooting over 50% from three-point range. It was not taking any long twos that are just not efficient shots in basketball anymore. And they got the job done there. So, Greg, I know we're going to talk about what Kentucky and what Arkansas also did the rest of this week, but to start there, because that was the most important part of it, one, we got an electric atmosphere. 2, I have to kind of ask you a couple questions here. The boo cheer thing was a big debate at the end of last week. Would you boo him? Would you cheer him? That kind of raged on. So, what side are you taking?
It's funny because I heard this question asked about 6,000 times last week and leading up to it. I never once asked myself. I don't know, because I'm not a Kentucky fan, so or obviously an Arkansas fan, so like it's not. I don't know that the question has any meaning to me. But like, if I try and put myself in a Kentucky fan's shoes, I still feel like, and again, some of this might come from just reading his books and kind of obviously the basketball has slipped a little bit, but I think genuinely he is a good guy and he wants what's best for those kids. And he brought a national title and a couple of Final Fours. I think it's okay to be disgruntled and say, hey, man, it was time. It was time for you to move on. I don't know that hearing from Rick Pitino that we should cheer him is like not the most tone deaf thing I've heard. But anyway, that's another point. I want to say that I think someone phrased this question as, would you boo, cheer, or be silent? I feel like I'd be the silent portion, where it's just like I'm not gonna add to his misery, but with the way things ended at Kentucky, I wouldn't also be like, hey man, this is everything we wanted. I mean, just look at what Mark Pope's done there. This is a one singular result, right?
Right.
But look at what Mark Pope has done with a roster that's been completely flipped in 1 year. I mean, that's got to tell you something.
Absolutely. I was on the side that I probably would have cheered in the pregame, and then after, like, once they're actually competing against your team, you can boo them and do all you want. With Calipari's complaining about calls, boo them, whatever you need to do. But that was kind of my take. I know there's a lot of people who have, like, some really tough takes about it, whether it was, like, hey, he left us for another team in the SEC. But that was what most fans were kind of asking him to do anyway. So he kind of gave you what you wanted in that case, and he also won a championship, and he brought in a lot of talent. So I know Mark Pope kind of mentioned like how much respect he had. Rick Pitino said he would have cheered, and I would have probably done that. I think Kentucky fans took a lot of stuff for granted there, and would have just. I mean, I would love to be in that atmosphere, but that's kind of my take on what I would do. In terms of the players who wore Arkansas stuff and were kind of chirping about the coach, I don't know about that one, man. I get that you want to stick up for your coach. I would get that you want to cheer for your coach, but they haven't been cheering for Arkansas up until this game. So I don't know. Arkansas has some other decent wins. So that's something that people can argue with a brick wall over for years to come, because I don't know if anything's changing. But there were some pretty notable players, including Reed Sheppard wearing an Arkansas shirt, and Ty Washington tweeting out, "Walk into your trap, take over your trap," and it's just like, okay, that's kind of a little tone deaf.
You missed the most important half of Reed Sheppard, is that he was wearing half and half, which I feel like is like the worst way to go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he should have just worn nothing. He should have worn clothes. He should have worn neutral clothes. Or he, like, I don't know, like he's wearing an Arkansas basketball T-shirt. Why not wear a shirt that, like, even a Kentucky one that says Coach Calipari on it, because of all the ones are printed. Yeah, crazy.
Doesn't Rothstein have like a Calipari last Corleone?
Yeah.
You can find something like that and support the coach. Like, if that's what you're truly committed to, because he has obviously zero ties to Arkansas. If you're truly committed to the coach, wear something that represents the coach.
Right, and for me, Kentucky fan, I respect all those guys. I will always love them for putting on the Kentucky uniform and choosing to go there. And the common thing was like, oh, all these guys were ones who had the tournament, no success in the tournament, and that's why they're doing this. And it's like, I still respect those guys. Even some of the guys like Davion Mintz played on that really bad, worst team in Kentucky history a couple of years ago. He battled, man. He was a tough guy, and I think it's a part of the fan base that you kind of see the craziness come out, but. That was kind of this was like one of the bigger stories in college basketball this entire year, was not just that, but also the former NBA players coming back and having that interaction, and Arkansas getting a big win, and now seeing if they can put, like, it's too early to talk about their tournament resume probably, but definitely them getting it in position to be on the bubble, like couple more wins, and then also Kentucky, you have to have a lot of doubts now because the defense played awful. They're 7-1 against top 25 teams, but they have some bad losses, and I think that goes to like Mark Pope's MO which is like you could beat anyone, but you can also lose to anyone. Amari Williams is playing pretty well, but when you take him off the court, the whole team is pretty useless. Lamont Butler might be out for the season. Andrew Carr's coming back slowly, and it's like a whole thing here, and the bench depth is now depleted because you have to put a lot of freshmen in big moments who maybe aren't ready for that in the new era of college basketball, where if you're not one of the top 4 or 5 freshmen, maybe that's not as hard to do to kind of step in mid-season when some of the other freshmen have kind of gotten a chance to kind of get more familiar with the role. So a lot of has come from this, a lot of discussion points, and it is, I think, the story of the season so far. Because people don't really want to talk about Auburn as much as they should, because Auburn is a really good basketball team, and Duke is still obviously a team everyone loves to hate, but not quite yet because Cooper Flagg's there. But I think it has been one of the stories of the season. Greg, just to kind of go over more of it, we have Kentucky beating Tennessee earlier in the week on the road. On the road, and they were still down those players. Like, it was crazy. We have, in that game, Zakai Ziegler leaves the game, and you think it's a serious injury. He comes back in the game. Then he misses the next game that they play. So it's, you don't know what's going on. So Kentucky gets the win, and there's no credit for that. You're kind of thinking like, hey, maybe they're undermanned, and like that gets them to kind of play together and everything. Jackson Robinson looks comfortable at the point guard spot. Amari Williams as well, bringing up a center who's playing point guard. And I think maybe even with Zakai going out, maybe this is kind of evidenced by Tennessee's next game because they beat Florida. without Zakai Ziegler or Igor Milicic. It might just be that if Jordan Gainey and Chaz Lanier play well, they win. If they don't, they lose. Because that's the only thing I can kind of put up to it. Is like they do look like they could be a top 5 team in the country when those guys play well. But when they don't play well, they are an average team at best. And that's what happens. So I don't know if to put too much into the Kentucky bag here, too much into the Tennessee bag. But again, we're trying to kind of encapsulate all what happened with this like little SEC triangle of teams, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Tennessee. And that's kind of what I came away with.
See, it's just weird because, and I can't remember. I feel like we were talking about like this kind of thing with Xavier and a couple other teams. Oh, we give them some time maybe to work in their rotation. They have injuries and stuff, and then you got Tennessee. No Igor Milicic, no Zakai Ziegler, goes and blasts Florida, and meanwhile you got Auburn, no Janai Broome for like 2 weeks. And they're just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got another result that we're going to talk about in a little bit. I don't want to jump ahead, but some of this stuff I just cannot make sense. There's just no pattern to some of this stuff. There's no rhyme. There's no reason. I mean, I'm glad I get to watch these games and just be surprised constantly. But as far as looking ahead and trying to tell myself I still feel like I'm sitting here saying you kind of have put it in a good window. There's going to be teams you like, teams you don't know about, and teams you don't like. And that's kind of where I'm at with picks this week, and kind of where I'm at with Kentucky is I'm moving them from I like kind of into that I don't know. Which they could go if they go, and again we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to their game that we're going to pick this week. But if they go and they have a good showing, but the thing that scares me the most is they shoot 43% from deep against Arkansas and they lose that game. And the funny thing is if we were coming in here and we were talking about them beating Tennessee, I was going to say, see, look, jokingly, this team, all they got to do is make shots and they're good. But then they go and they make shots against Arkansas. I guess it just goes to show you how bad that defense is right now. And maybe Mark Pope can pull some strings, but I don't know that having your best defender out, possibly now you said for the rest of the season, is going to lead to better defense.
Nope.
I just don't. I mean, that is the scary thing. And all that, truth be told, I'm sure Kentucky fans are going to be let down if it turns out to be another first round loss, and you should, that's fine. But I still think if you were to just sit here and look at this year as a whole and look to the future, I would still say this looks like a good hire at least at the start. Anybody, can have a good year and then whatever, but at least it looks like Kentucky is trending in a better direction than they were before. It's hard to look at the forest from the trees when you're like, we're going to lose in the first round again, or maybe, but they're gonna have, it's the SEC, so they're gonna have some games coming up where hopefully we'll get some sort of idea of. And I think the bigger thing you've already mentioned is what's Lamont Butler's status. That's going to be a bigger thing for me, not just the defense, but seems to be kind of leader in the clubhouse kind of guy, and that may be the most meaningful thing. Otego away is great, and Mario Williams look like he's playing really good right now, but unless they're just going to suddenly all of them just take their defense up a notch, I would be scared about picking this team to do anything other than win one game. Again, you say that, and then you get matchups, so you're like, well, now I got 3 teams that I don't like in the same pod, and I don't know what to do with them. But in general, I'd feel conflicted picking this team to the Sweet 16 if Lamont Butler's not back.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost hoping they play a better team and they just play better against better teams. And I don't know. I think the importance will be shown down the stretch here of the defense. This is the worst defensive team that Mark Pope has had since his last year at Utah Valley, which is really weird because they do have, Lamont Butler, obviously they're not playing great defense when he's there, but he's playing better defense. Lamont Butler, great defender. Amari Williams, really good defender. And you have Otega Owe, really good defender. So it does kind of make your head scratch your head how that's working out. And it also kind of mentioned it with Jordan Gainey and Jackson Neer for Tennessee. Like, Kobe Bray is such a streaky shooter for him. Like, one game he'll go 5 of 7, the next game he'll go 0 for 5, and it's like they sometimes go as he goes. And sometimes Jackson Robinson, who's been on fire recently and kind of carrying the load, but it doesn't always work out the best when you're so contingent on those guys having good games, when you could have more of a balanced effort. The one guy who's been a constant, as you said, is Otega Owe. Been very good at getting to the basket and playing some solid defense as well. So hopefully they figure it out, but there is a lot to figure out.
I will say Jackson Robinson has stepped up. There were times early in the season where we were saying, where is this guy? He'd go 2 points, 0 points, 2 points for a couple of games. He looks like he's playing good ball. If you want to hang your hat on anything, all right, maybe we can ride him into this team taking it to the next level. They're still going to need to get better defense. Like, you can't just we saw against Arkansas, you can't just outshoot the other team. Like, that's not good enough now.
Yeah.
They're going to have to play some defense.
One more note before we move on, Greg, too, that I think that this, like, you're right. I think what you said earlier is right. Mark Pope, still a good hire. You could lose in the first round, so it could be a good hire. You could have your doubts about things moving forward, but this was a team that was put together very late because of Calipari leaving when he did. They met at the Final Four for Arkansas when like that. A lot of coaching changes have already happened. You have to go put their roster together. I think a lot of people were excited about the transfers they got, but not like a national championship winning roster. And we talked about how everyone kind of like outside of Duke and Auburn, I think, has a lot of questions where there might be two teams right now that we both feel really good about the way things are going, especially this past week. So, just a lot to kind of keep in perspective here with the injuries too. If they're healthy, maybe they don't lose some of these games. Maybe they could be doing a little better. But yeah, I think the focus might be on obviously like trying to fix things in the short term. Lamont Butler, they said, looking like it's trending the right way. They just are trying to make sure there's no setbacks, and there's a lot of setbacks with his injury, I guess is how it's worded. So that's the update on that. But just try to get as good of a seed as possible moving forward, and then just hope to God that that's not one of the bad teams you lose to is in the NCAA tournaments, because they have way too many games where they're losing to unranked teams, and they have way too much talent to do that. All right, so let's move on to another team, another Wildcats, the Arizona Wildcats. We have them playing Iowa State, and it looks kind of bleak. And then Caleb Love hits a behind half-court shot when they're down 3 at the buzzer in regulation to tie it after not playing well for most of the game. And then he plays well in overtime, too, and starts finding a shot. And they are able to beat Iowa State. Iowa State was kind of curious to me, Greg, because Taman Lipsey had a good game. Curtis Jones kind of struggled, and that might, with how many injuries they've had to deal with this year, that's going to lead to a lot of losses. But Arizona gets that big win, and a team that we talked about a couple weeks ago didn't have any big wins. I was kind of skeptical about them in the beginning of the season. They've kind of turned things on, and they get more comfortable with each other. So big win for them. They also, I'll save the rest of it for later, but they get that win. I'll leave it for there because we have a lot to go over with this team as well.
Yeah, Caleb Love was 1 of 10 for that 3 that he hit from deep, specifically before he hit that half-court shot. In the most Caleb Love thing ever. I will say this: last year, statistically, he had an amazing year in terms of efficiency. And Joe and I had come off these conversations where I had said things like, "I just don't know how I feel about if I would want him on my team or not," and whatnot. From an efficiency standpoint, Joe was like, "Hey, you take the good with the bad. And overall, I think this guy elevates your program." Maybe not in those words, but something along those lines. And here is your example A1. I don't know about anything as improbable as a half court shot, but in the overtime, like those are the spots where once it got to overtime, you kind of knew what was going to happen. These are the shots that he makes. Those are the moments that he's built for. We've kind of talked about a little bit about Kentucky, and it's, man, situationally, who's the dude? Who's that guy they're going to get? There was no question going into overtime. Who's touching that ball? And again, he could play off his team. He passed the ball a couple times in overtime, which I couldn't believe, but he did. But those are the moments he's built for, and that's what makes this team scary as a March product. Just ask Mike Krzyzewski about how it is playing against specifically him in March. And that, quietly, Joe, I don't know how often you peek at the net rankings.
Mm-hmm.
So they entered the top 25 today. Have you looked at their net ranking anytime recently? Like if I asked you just to guess what it is, have you seen it today? Or I am thoroughly surprised. I could not believe what it was.
It's pretty high, right?
It is high. It's high.
Yeah, I was just saying, I check it every day during the season, at least every weekday during the season, and I don't remember exactly what number they are, but they are higher than people would think.
It's 11 right now.
Yeah.
Like, that is zero shot of missing the tournament. Like, none. Of course, but I'm saying that is not even near bubble territory. And before last week, I would have thought, oh, this is barely a bubble team. So I don't know if it's metrics or what that's got them here. But obviously the Iowa State win, great. Mm-hmm. But I still look up and down the resume, and I mean, there's not a ton else here. I don't know, but the net likes them. So, well, I mean, by far their best win is Iowa State, and after that, I don't know. Is it you? No, it's maybe might be UC. No, they beat Baylor. That was at home, but so that's probably their next best win.
Well,
I don't know why the net loves them, but it does. So,
well, let's just throw out the net because it is.
I don't know what to make. I don't know what to make of that.
No, I don't either. But let's throw out the net because Gonzaga is 13th in the net right now. And it's crazy. Like I don't. Gonzaga is not a good basketball team right now. I think talent-wise they're good, but this is like the biggest year where it's like the net means nothing. And I know this is kind of off topic, but I was just flabbergasted when I keep on seeing Gonzaga so high in the net because they play somewhat efficient basketball sometimes. I can get to the tangent about how efficiency does not judge a team and how you shouldn't really use that, but I mean, man, it is crazy how it's coming out. But Arizona gets that win, Greg. And a credit to Tommy Lloyd, too. You mentioned like the efficient player and everything. They've had to piece things around Caleb Love. I think at the early parts of the year, he was very, very inefficient. It's getting a little bit better, but they've had to piece things together with him, so credit to him. Before we get to Arizona's next game, I think we should focus on Iowa State because the Arizona's next game could lead to a larger conversation. I'm not sure that the Iowa State's next one is going to. They lose to Kansas State. Kansas State has struggled this year. We have all the mentions about Coleman Hawkins, being the $1 million man or $2 million man, whatever it is. And they're not playing well, but they get this win 80-61. And it was kind of the same thing for Iowa State, at least. They had Tamin Lipsey stepping up. He's kind of had a rough year by his own standards, but he had 20 points in this one. They had Curtis Jones struggling again. So for me, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about Kansas State because they could end up being irrelevant still, to be honest. But Iowa State, I think it kind of gives you some doubts about them if they don't get healthy, if they don't put Curtis Jones back on the bench and let him be that spark plug rather than making him a starter. And he has played well as a starter at some points, but I think his best role might be coming off the bench as a sixth man and kind of feeling like he, can be that spark plug. That is something that I think we have to talk about, Greg, because I think some people, not me, but some people had it, Duke, Auburn, Iowa State as the top three in tier by themselves. I was Duke, Auburn, and because of things like this. But there is an element that they're injured. There is an element that, it's a Big 12 schedule that might be tougher than it looks. But what do you think? This is kind of a crazy week for them, losing both those games.
I'm glad you phrased it that way because I'm going to go back to kind of the way we've already been framing it. I've still got them in teams I like, and I will say that yes, I was a part of the group that, hey, it's Auburn, it's Duke, it's Iowa State. They're on their own plateau. They're on their own tier. I think this kind of week gives you the okay. Maybe we gotta slide them. Like Duke struggles against NC State, but they finished the game. I think that's the difference between your tier 1A teams and your okay. There's a slight gap. Auburn can win without their best player. There's a gap between
Mm-hmm.
those two teams and everyone else. I'll admit that now, but again, it's funky because some teams are able to ride out this injury thing, and others it gets bumpy. It's funny because they're a half court shot away from one last week, and now they walk away with two. It I think that is maybe the thing give you more of the panic that it was Kansas. It was an Arizona game that you had won, and it was Kansas State at home at Hilton,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's that's the worst part. You should beat almost anyone at home. As good as they've played, yes, I know there's no Milos Momcilovic, but still, that's a game you got to have as bad as Kansas State has been. Maybe it's their one-off. That's still their only loss outside of Quad 1. I still am in on this team. I understand that now that kind of bad look on their resume might prevent them from getting a 1 seed. They still could finish out the year strong and end up on the 1 line. But I still like this team. I can now recognize, hey, not as much as I like Duke and Auburn, but I am still not going to say there's no way I'm picking them into my Final Four. Now, if the bracket breaks a certain way, but I'm not writing them off like that. I'm just not. I still really like this team, and I have to think in all likelihood they're going to end up in my Final Four unless there's just a team that I like that much more.
Yeah, they're fully capable of going on a run, much like they did last year in the tournament as well. Like they didn't make the Final Four, obviously, but they can definitely do that. And I think it's important to note maybe we don't like Iowa State right now, but maybe we do like them when they're fully healthy and when they can put things together. So I'm still not going to put them in the Duke Auburn category, and I think 90% of brackets might pick Duke or Auburn this year. We'll see how things shake out down the stretch. Injuries and everything can affect that, but they are a team that I don't think we should write off. I just think they're not maybe in that tier, and I think that this week kind of helped prove that. So that is Iowa State. Greg, we have a whole discussion that's going to become from Arizona State, I'm sure. Arizona gets the win over Arizona State. There is some technical fouls down the stretch, and that is that happens in rivalry games. A little headbutt here. But then Bobby Hurley refuses to shake Arizona's hands. And Tommy Lloyd, you see this clip of him putting his hands up, all right, I guess. That makes sense, I guess. And that was okay, a little bit weird, but you could maybe see okay, that's fine. But then after the game, Bobby Hurley goes to the press and says, they were talking trash to the bench. It wasn't policed right. I thought they would have had more this discipline or respect. I'm not voting Caleb Love for Big 12 all conference honors. I have a lot of takes about this, but I'll let you go first, buddy. Where do you stand?
I feel like every time I look on social media and hear about this, I hear a different clip of something he said, and I almost wonder if this is one of those times where maybe I don't know how the rules work, but maybe skipping his post game press might have been better. Maybe collect his thoughts and unified with himself, because there were just some things he said. Okay, I can kind of hear that, and it was also weird because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Arizona State is one of those where the benches are on, they're like Vanderbilt. The benches are on the no, maybe it wasn't that the benches. It's they were going into the tunnels.
Yeah,
he was calling it. I got a fan that, not me, but one of the views I was looking at was a fan cam, and in my head I thought, well, maybe that's where the benches were, but no, that obviously they're going to the tunnels. But having some guys go 3/4 of the court to get off it makes it even that much weirder. It's different if they had been dribbling the ball out and whatever, but I don't know. So here's the thing. There are some things that you just can't do. As soon as you see a guy on the floor and get stood over, or make physical contact with another player, a shove, hey man, that kind of taunting, that's gonna get called. If you're just talking trash, I don't know how many things that I that you could tell me just the words alone are enough for a technical. Yeah, there's certain things you can't say to a referee, but I'm not. Is there anything? I mean, like, outside of I want to kill your family, like but like, what could he have said that was that bad that Bobby Hurley's never heard it before and it needed to be policed? Like, if you don't like it that much, just double team him and let somebody else score. If it's him and it's so bad that he is so bad that you're not gonna vote him for all conference honors. If that is how bad it is, okay, double team him and let somebody else score. If it is that bad and the refs aren't doing something about it, then you do something about it. Make him shut up. I'm not saying that's a practical approach, but if it's that bad in your mind that you have to pull your, and there are times where maybe it's situationally it makes sense. Hey, maybe we don't shake hands after this game. We kind of nod to each other. Yep, a good game. We're still dealing with 18 to 23-year-olds. As much as you want to be their coach, we've had. I mean, we're not that far removed. Forget kids. We're not that far removed from Juwan Howard slapping a guy in a handshake line. So, I think maybe it could have been one of those cooler heads prevail. Hey, this isn't the best situationally, but when you go and make the remarks, you're not doing yourself any. If you just step up there and say, hey, it was a little heated. I didn't want it to turn into anything. I respect Tommy. There's definitely a way to go into that presser and say all the right things, and he just didn't.
He did not.
I'm done. That's it. I'm done. So you gave me my piece.
Oh boy. Yeah, you're right. First thing, try to win the game, and then you don't have to worry about that as much. Two, this is a rivalry game. There's going to be trash talk. If they're not policing it well, then take it up with the Pac-12 officiating. Do not take it up with Arizona, I thought they had more respect than that. Don't take it out on a player. I don't know, there is not anything I think a player could say on a court that would get me to say, I'm going to take away his vote. It's about how you played, right? So if you're available to play games, you do play games, you don't do anything off the court that gets you suspended from playing those games. He doesn't get suspended by the Pac-12 if they could do an investigation after this, then vote him. That is such a insult to the process of this. We need to, we talk about sometimes how the media doesn't do well with the poll that they put out. Coaches a lot of times don't do well with their votes either. It is a travesty that we are going to let this rivalry game possibly affect, all Big 12 or whatever it's going to be, Big 12 Player of the Year. That is number one, or number two, whatever. Number three, Bobby Hurley, if you watched him play, which I've only seen highlights for the most part, he was before our time a little bit, he was not the best citizen of all time either, all right? This dude played a little dirty. His teammate Christian Laettner stomped on a player's chest and did not get a technical. So you can go F off. I'm trying not to say a lot of big curse words here, Greg. I know some people don't like it as much. You can go F off. You had a player step on someone else's chest. You have a lot of self-importance here. You haven't done anything at Arizona State. If you want to go see some of the stuff he's done, go look at Richard Jefferson's Twitter profile. Some of the stuff he's done is kind of shady too. This is the craziest thing of all time that I see him, of all people. They didn't act right, so I'm not going to, what entitled, who put you on this pedestal? Is it because you were such a good player? Is it because your dad was a legendary coach? Is it because your brother's a great coach? I don't get it. What is this thing for you? You cannot use this as an excuse to not vote Big 12 Player of the Year, not vote All Big 12 for a guy, especially when you have not done some of the best things yourself, which includes kind of finding that edge as a player, kind of going up near that line where maybe you're crossing it, or maybe some of your teammates did, but also you're not even coaching the team well. You're 12-9 right now. What are we doing? Why does he still have a job that he is in this position anyway? I think he's frustrated with his own situation, to be honest, because I don't know what's going on here. So this is the most inflammatory thing I've ever had on this whole show. But I was so. He must have, as you said, Greg, he must have said, I'm going to kill your mother or something like that. Until we find out what he said, I'm assuming that it's just regular trash talk. Maybe it would push up against the line. Maybe even went over the line. But that is not your player. You don't get to, maybe you talk to Tommy Lloyd after the game. Maybe you kind of tell him what's going on. Maybe you tell the refs. Maybe you comment about the Pac-12 officiating. I just hate this all around. Man, it just really comes from like I kind of feel like a hypocritical place from him, and I don't like it at all. Don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but
well, I mean, the only thing I want to add is and I kind of already said it, but if he's taunting the bench, you take that up with the refs, right? Because you can't do that. You're at home. Like I wouldn't think it would be that hard to be like, hey refs, this is going on. Can you if anything, half the time when we're watching these games, we're saying, I cannot believe they called a technical on that. You gotta let that go. If anything, I have a buddy that I don't know if he listens to the show or not, but he's a high school ref, and I've just been asking him some questions this year, and he's been like, Greg, let me tell you something. We know time, score, and situation. It's in our head, and there's some things that do affect whether a call gets made or not. They know this is a rivalry game. Every one of those refs are not walking in the building going, I wonder if these teams have ever played before. Like, it's not that. So they probably, honestly, I know it's not the NBA, but they probably know a lot of these players by first name. And you can see, if you're watching games, you can see players come up. Again, it's not as close a relationship as NBA players with NBA referees, but you could see them talking to the refs. Hey, what did you see there? I really don't agree. Like, they know who's going to open their mouth and trash talk. So if you're telling me it was that bad and there's 3 of them out there, one of them is going to hear it at some point because you were losing the game, so the crowd wasn't very loud for much of the game. So it just seems like I'm going to take my ball and go home stuff, man. I don't know.
He learned from the best, Coach K, when it comes to this, of like trying to teach other teams' players, trying to maybe overstep his bounds, taking too much offense to how other players play, whether it's shooting a shot late in the game when the shot clock's still going on, and Dylan Brooks was too classy to do that, shooting a shot when the shot clock was going to go off on him. It seems like maybe he got this from honest beginnings, but man, I really do think that this, like, we have a lot of, I would say, Greg, media members who don't like certain coaches. We talk about maybe someone like Goodman doesn't like Calipari, and like there is like some other coaches who maybe don't like other media members or vice versa. Jim Boeheim had problems with the media. The fact that not a lot of people have kind of gone on and kind of roasted him for this, at least that I've heard yet, is kind of crazy to me. And I wonder if it's just kind of the ties that are in college basketball. People stick up with their friends. We've seen this past week another story outside of like the game of like Seth Greenberg talking up Calipari and like going and DMing other people if they have a bad take, like saying Calipari's bad, like and DMing them and telling them what's what. And like, I kind of think it's like become more of like a relationship thing where like you can't go across this guy, because if you go across this guy, then you got to go across Dan Hurley. And I don't know what's going on, but I feel like this is a crazy situation that people have not addressed in Big Four. Maybe we'll see it this week as more podcasts come out, more media comes out. But it was kind of like obviously a lot going on this weekend, and it was one little thing that went on, but it was like massive implications for, Arizona's future, for the Big 12 and everything too. So a lot of things we have to keep up with here in the next week and see how things shake out and see if like there's anything from the Pac-12, anything from Bobby Hurley going forward. It is going to be interesting to watch that down the stretch, and whether he's going to even have a job at the end of the year, because it's not been the most successful either for him. With that, Greg, we have more officiating drama with our next game. We have Texas.
What conference is this game we're about to talk about?
Sorry, Big 12. Yeah, I said Pac-12. You're right.
Oh,
yeah. Well, what year are we in?
More Big 12.
Okay, so
don't talk about Big 12. More Big 12.
To clarify, Richard Jefferson's tweets about him was that when Richard Jefferson worked for the Pac-12, Bobby Hurley would complain to the Pac-12. Now that they're in the Big 12, yes, it's a Big 12 issue. He should go to the Big 12 officials, which, again, college basketball officials, they're not like, it's not like football where it's like, these are SEC officials. They're like, they move around. So you'll see a guy doing a game in the Big East, then they'll do it in the WCC, then they'll do it in the ACC. It's not like that, but you can talk to the head of officiating for each conference and figure that out. So that's just a little clarity. But yes, Big 12 officiating overall is going to get a lot of interesting things going on this week. We have Texas Tech and Houston playing. Greg, we have a player getting kicked out. JT Toppin, a guy you have liked since his New Mexico days, getting kicked out. What, before the first media timeout on a play where
it was I think it was 16:04. It was definitely before the first media timeout. It wasn't a situation where they were stopping for the media timeout. It was the violation that occurred at the it would have been the media timeout the next time they threw the ball in, basically.
Yeah, so Houston plays this tough physical defense, and they were playing very close to JT Toppin. Looked like JT Toppin maybe kicked a player, right? Gets tossed for it. And they even review it. He gets tossed. Grant McCaslin gets tossed. And you kind of think at that point, like, Texas Tech's kind of screwed here. They keep on going on. There's more bad officiating in this game. Honestly, a little bit both ways. But they kind of go on these runs where, like, Houston's about to pull away, and Texas Tech keeps on thinking big shot down the stretch. Force OT. They end up getting the win in overtime. It was a very good game to watch if you want to go back and rewatch a game, because this like kind of gets you from the officiating point. It also kind of gets you like Texas Tech kind of riled up together and came back and won this one. Chance McMillan had 23 points. And unfortunately for a good game, the officiating takes precedent here. We have Texas Tech AD Kirby Hocutt saying, putting this into review for the Big 12, like, hey, this is messed up. How did this happen? This was totally out of line with the officiating. So there are like a lot of controversies this week, and this is just one of them.
Yeah, we mentioned JT Toppin. We mentioned Grant McCaslin getting thrown out. You kind of glossed over that. I think that was a horrible call.
Oh yeah.
I did see someone mention today. Think about what a shortstop does when they're throwing across the like they kick their leg out, because it's part of when your body is going one way and you're trying to throw another. You've got to create momentum somewhere. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a Newton whatever about it, but can't have it. I don't understand how you go to review that and come back and say flagrant 2. I understand that because of the letter of the law, because my first thought, Joe, I don't know if you thought this, I thought, how could it not just be a flagrant 1 and let him stay in the game? But then I realized they're officiating that it was unnecessary and intentional contact, because if it wasn't intentional, so okay, I get how it can't be a flagrant 1, it has to be a flagrant 2. But I just don't understand how you can go. This is like a targeting. Like, I don't understand how you can go to review, look at it, however many times they looked at it, and say, yeah, he's gone. Did you see JT Toppin finding out he was ejected? They went over to him. It's funny because you can. Again, they're in the bowl, so I don't know how sound carries, but you can hear the announcer say JT Toppin has been ejected, and he's not walking off the court yet. I unfortunately have never been on the floor for a Division I basketball game. I would imagine with the way sound carries, you maybe can't hear everything the PA announcer says, but the ref goes over to him and says you're ejected, and he's like, what? Like, what are you talking about?
Yep.
Which, and then Grant McCaslin sees the replay, which seeing that sequence of him pulling up a tablet, because it wasn't just like one sequence of him pulling up a tablet and then getting mad. The ESPN panned to him and then panned back to the game and then panned to him, and there was probably like a 35-second between him getting a tablet and him going berserk, which just felt like almost like a Three Stooges type thing for me. But okay, so we got all that. All right, Houston's going to win the game. Oh, they didn't.
Yeah.
They went to overtime. Okay, well, so they go to overtime, and Darian Williams fouls out, and they're going to win. No. And Federico fouls out. No, they still lost. Man, this is another one of those teams that, we already mentioned. They just got their first Quad 1 win, and they've gained a second because of UCF. And they play tough, hard-nosed defense. And I mean, the only caveat that you can put on this game is Juwan Roberts played. I I was sitting here watching a replay of this game, and when they froze his Juwan Roberts hurt himself on a drive to the basket, and when they froze the still image of his ankle being rolled, I wanted to vomit.
Yeah.
I have no earthly idea how he finished the game. And he played well, and he had a chance to give them the winning bucket, but they were ready for him to spin back to his strong side, so he traveled. That's good scouting. That's good on Grant McCaslin and now Jeff Linder taking it, but it good on him. I still just really like this team, man. It's weird that I'm doing this with Houston and Iowa State. I don't think Houston's on the same level as Iowa State for me, but I am just going to have a hard time quitting this team when it comes to March. I just am. And it's one of those things where the resume just simply does not show it. There's no rhyme or reason for me to be in love with this team, but I am. They actually, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they moved up a spot in the AP top 25 this week.
I believe they did, yeah.
Which I was confused. I was confused that, but then there were so many other things that happened. I was like, all right, fine. These, I guess that was just the way it worked out. Yeah, they did. They moved up to 5, so go figure. But I don't know, man. I really like this team. I think there's something to them. I do. It's going to be hard for me to quit them. I think they've got some dynamic scorers. They're a little undersized inside, but JoJo Tugler's coming along, and he's giving them some size and some rolling ability. And Malik Wilson's had some good games. Arsenault's back and healthy. I don't know that I'm going to be able to say no to this team when it comes to, again, all of this is context matters. It's going to depend on where they end up, but I feel like I'm going to have a really difficult time not picking this team to go on a March Madness run. And I know how nuts that sounds, but I don't care. I just like them. Again, I'm using your, maybe not properly, maybe this isn't how you imagine it, but I just can't separate what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling when I watch them from the resume. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the computer numbers are still pretty good for them too, correct?
They are, yeah.
Even despite, so yeah, I mean, they're third in KenPom, so I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world, but it's definitely, there's a separation between their resume, the teams they've beaten, and how far I think they could go. I think there's going to be a ton of teams that maybe get underseeded, not because of, like, their resume is they're going to get the seed they deserve, but I think they're going to be better than their seed, just on talent, on whatever. Some of these teams that are going through injuries, and we're going to maybe have one of those sneaky, like, we look up in the Elite Eight's got like a 5 seed, a 7 seed, a 9 seed, and a 4 seed to go along with Duke and Auburn. But I like them too much. Now, give Texas Tech their flowers. They're a lot better than I thought they were. You've been saying this for weeks now, so everybody should be listening to you. I don't know what their ceiling is. What do you think when they have their coach and their best player and their second big guy and their powerful, when they have all those guys?
The computers like them pretty much too. I think even more so than the resume did a couple weeks ago. Once they started going on this little tear, that they started getting recognition, that's obviously everyone else has caught up to what the computers were saying. So again, we bashed computers earlier. Now we'll kind of give them a little credit here. I think their ceiling might be Sweet 16, Elite 8. Like, I wouldn't say book it to a Final Four or anything, but I think they're good enough. They have enough players. I think Grant McCaslin's a good enough coach that they can win, 2 games in the NCAA tournament, again, depending on matchups, because I know what everyone's going to take from this conversation is Greg's 4 Final Four teams are Iowa State, Houston, Duke, and Auburn. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see down the stretch. For me with Houston, Greg, I'm still thinking that they win games like this if they have Jamal Shead. I know we always think that at this point these teams are finished products and they're totally over what happened last year. Jamal Shead was such a good player, defensively, a good point guard, set up this whole team that And a lot of this Houston team is back too, so I still think they're adjusting to not having that calming presence, and I don't think they lose that game at home with the other team's best player and coach out if they have a guy like Jamal Shead there. So as right now, I don't like Houston as much as you do. This next month, as we go into it, we'll see if they improve. I'm not putting it off the table. I think there's only two teams that I really, really like this year, which are the top two. Everyone else, like I think you said it with Kentucky, Greg, like they're in this mesh of like this next month is going to be where we kind of see how they do it. For reference, what was it, 2 years ago, UConn lost all those games in January and then started bouncing back late February and March and then went on that run. This is when you want to see those teams kind of come up. So Iowa State's in that category. They had some rough times. Can they come back up? Houston just lost this game. Can they come back up? Kentucky with their bad week. There's a lot of motion to be had in this next couple weeks here specifically. All right, so we have a lot more to go over, Greg. We have Baylor comes back to beat Kansas. It was the largest blown lead in Kansas program history. I believe it was 21 points at the half, I believe was the score. Kansas struggled from three. They had, I think, everyone back from this game. So KJ Adams had missed some time. DeJuan Harris had missed some time as well. But they had everyone back from this, I believe. They had the game in their hands. They blew it down the stretch. VJ Edgecombe for Baylor had some injury issues. But Robert Wright, man, the guy, best player on Baylor. I don't care about NBA. I don't care about that right now. But Robert Wright, best college basketball player they have, 24 points, 6 assists, showed up big time down the stretch for him. That is what might propel this Baylor team to kind of get back on the right track.
All right, Joe, let me write you a scenario here.
Mm-hmm.
It's 40-21. It's halftime. Let's see. Baylor, yeah, they're at home, but they don't have Jeremy Roach. I'm going to tell you that VJ Edgecombe's going to get hurt at some point in the second half. How much money are you going to put on Kansas if I give you, I don't know, plus 100 for them up 19 points at the half?
That's a good point. I was going to say 0 because of the odds, but plus 100, I put a lot of money.
Yeah, a substantial amount of money. And they didn't just lose, they lost by double digits, man. And the wild thing is, we've been saying, hey, maybe the offense will come along for Kansas, but hey, the defense has turned a corner. They gave up 60 in the second half alone.
Yep.
They only scored 70 points in the game, and they gave up 60 in the second half. They almost lost just on Baylor's second half alone. That is a bad half of basketball.
Yeah.
And for a team that comes into the year ranked number 1 in the preseason AP poll, and we start off the year saying, hey, you know, it looks like they got some good stuff going on. Feels like these transfers are doing okay. And then things just start to tail off, and it's almost like, have they hit their rock bottom yet? I think that's the question. I don't think anyone in their right mind will ever question, can Bill Self turn something around? I don't think that's okay. We don't need to ask that question. The question you got to ask yourself is there still more down to go before they look at getting up? And after this kind of loss, I don't know that they can just get right back up off the mat. Like, there might be some more down before we even have a shot at seeing them get back up. And that's talking in general terms and anecdotal terms, but for the talent that they have on this roster, it should not be a game you lose against a shorthanded Baylor, even though you're on the road. I want to believe in this team, but I've definitely I thought it was going to be a kind of a Houston, Iowa State, Kansas at the top of the Big 12 thing. I heard someone, hey, how would you power rank the Big 12 teams right now? Where would you put just for a second? Is Kansas above Arizona for you right now? Is Kansas like, those are the questions you got to start asking yourselves. And it's not that they can't turn this into something, but the further down you get, the harder it is to dig out of that hole. And then we start looking at something like last year where they're playing Samford in the first round, and Samford's been pretty good, and I mean, if they came a decently bad call away from losing that game, go on to lose to Gonzaga, who also had their questions last year and also is having their questions this year. But I feel like I'm trending towards this being, they really have a lot to show me. And I don't know that they have the opportunities left to show me them. Like, I want to believe in this team, but this is a team I'm able to. Now, they got one tonight, but outside of Iowa State tonight, like at Utah, at BYU, they got a home game against Texas Tech. They've got at Houston, but they've had their questions, as we know. They've got Arizona at home, but they're not. I don't know that they have, unless they just, win all but one of these games that they got left and going in the Big 12 tournament. I don't know that I'm going to be able to say, yeah, I think I could pick them to win a couple of games. I think this seems like primed to get a 5 seed and lose their first game. Primed for that, if they even get a 5 seed.
This team is perfectly constructed if it was 2005. I'll say that. I mean, yeah, the post presence in defense is kind of maybe an issue, but they talked about it a lot. They have 2 paint cloggers. They have DeJuan Harris, who doesn't like to shoot, and I think had a bad shooting game in this one as well. And they have these transfers who haven't panned out either, and some of them are good 3-point shooters. They have too many guys who want the ball in their hands, and in that era that would have worked, where they could have the point guard has the ball. This is how it works, right? Bill Self can turn this around. It might take putting the ball in Zeke Mayo's hands more. That guy's been their best player this year. Like, I don't know how to say it, but like, the only transfer has been impactful. DeJuan Harris can run the offense. He can be a traditional point guard, but we're seeing some lulls with that as well. And even when Hunter Dickinson gets the ball, I think you might have to take the ball out of his hands a little bit more and say, hey, man, you need to focus on rebounding, putting baskets back in. You might need to bench KJ Adams, and not because KJ Adams is playing poorly, but because you can't have 2 bigs like that on the floor. Not that Hunter Dickinson can't shoot threes, but he likes to operate in the post a lot more. So there has to be some dramatic changes that we haven't seen. The talent is there where they can be a good team. And like I said, if it was 20 years ago, they might be winning the national championship because of the way that things are constructed. But they need to shake things up. They need to kind of fix things in a way that I'm not sure they're going to be willing to do. I will keep my mind open to it for the last month and a half of the season because I think Bill Self has shown that he can make teams go on runs. And it doesn't mean they won't win any more big games. I mean, we're going to pick their game later tonight. Full disclosure, I have Kansas. I don't know if that means that they're going to be a good team. I really don't. But they should be a good team. And they can. There's enough in there that you can make them a good team. And you haven't seen it. So we will have to see how that comes out. And you're right. I don't know how to rank the Big 12 teams. That includes Baylor, too. And Baylor's just all over the map as well. So the last thing I'll say, Greg, if you're a person named Robert and you have a third in your name, go to Baylor. RG3, RW3. There you go. Robert Wright the third star. All right, we have a lot more to get to, Greg, so we're going to try to do as much as possible here. I want you to apologize for the next point. You said Solo balls out for UConn. Explain yourself.
He's going by Solo ball, and he balled out. What else do you want?
All right, so yeah, they've been looking for star power since Liam McNeely has been injured. He did not come back for this game either. They played Marquette. UConn played Marquette. And won 77-69. This one was on the road. Cam Jones had 22 points for Marquette, but Solo Ball, with his 25 points, 7 of 11 shooting, 7 of 9 from deep, gave them the win, and it was kind of an important one, not in the sense that I think we thought UConn was going to miss the tournament or anything, but if they want to have a chance at like improving their seed by the end of the year, when Liam McNeely comes back and they get some big East wins, I think this is an important one.
I think this is one of those teams to add to the list of might end up underseeded, not because of the resume, but just because of the way things worked out. And just give Dan Hurley the Baltimore material that he needs to win a 3rd straight title. Just give it to him. I mean, this is a huge game for them to win at Marquette. No Liam McNeely. I texted Joe that I'm assuming it was a typo or whatever, but I had 2 tweets right in a row in my feed, and one said Liam McNeely is available tonight, and the very next one was Liam McNeely is out tonight. And I was like, okay, somebody got something wrong or typoed, but winning this game at Marquette is huge. They got a really big game. I don't know if I want to say it's bigger, but it's probably on par at the same level as this one. Maybe you disagree that we're going to pick in a little bit. Is it time, Joe? Is it time to get back on the Dan Hurley train, or because listen, you don't want to be on the wrong side of history with Dan Hurley, because if you do, if you say no, it's not time yet, then he might find your address and come scream at you and tell you he's the best in the damn game, and that's really scary. I don't think I would want to be yelled at by him, but in all seriousness, it's just so hard to decide. Like, do I want to trust them now? It sounds like Liam McNeely is ready to come back. So outside of a short stretch without him, they basically haven't lost since they came back from Maui. Again, stretch without him, they lose. Now he's getting ready to come back again. So do we just, all right, he's back, and I don't know, man. This is just one of these things with the sport where I have no clue. I hate being on the fence. I'm sure Dan Hurley will find this podcast, listen to it, and tweet about it, but I do not know what to do with this team right now. I don't. Even with them getting their best player, their most pivotal player back, I just still have a problem trusting them, which again, I'm sure Dan Hurley checks podcast transcripts and is just looking for something to put on the locker room bulletin board. I just gave it to him, but I don't know. What do you think?
I can't wait.
Do you have an opinion one way or the other? Or?
I can't wait to see your bracket. This is a Fitz Bottom 4 team, Greg Cat. I'm kidding. This is I'm not all the way out. I'm not all the way. I'm not picking them to win the national championship. I'll tell you that much. That probably resides with Auburn. As much as I took a risk with Creighton last year, I think Auburn is a lot better than a lot of other teams. Maybe Duke. I could be swayed on Duke, but it's gonna take a lot. It hurt me. Yeah, it does. But I was the one who was saying that I think they could have an Anthony Davis-like season out of Cooper Flagg. It's certainly looking that way. Not that Anthony Davis needs to be in the news anymore this week for the trade that went down in the NBA, but that's how things go. I don't know about UConn. I think maybe a Sweet 16. And, I think if they lose, I think we can officially blame Bobby Hurley for cursing his whole family with whatever that tirade was, because that was, interesting. So I'm with you. I don't know how I feel about that. And I do kind of question Marquette's ability to make a run, where I think this year I was kind of like, well, they don't have Tyler Kolek, we'll see what happens. But Cam Jones is playing awesome. I don't know how much they have around them, to be honest. They've kind of built this program in a way where like they retain a lot of their players. They don't go into the transfer portal very often. But I kind of feel like something's missing there, and I don't know how I feel about it. I love Cam Jones as a player. We talked about that a lot, but I don't know. That's something we'll have to address later on once we get closer to March.
I think it's okay, Joe, to say that maybe the Big East is a little bit turning out a little bit better than we were worried about. Like late November, early December, it was man, this might be in the tanker, but I think there's just so many other quality teams out there that it's going to be hard. It's hard to look at these two teams and St. John's and whoever else makes it and say, yeah, I can trust them over one of these other battle-tested teams from. And again, it's not just because they're an SEC team, but we've got more data points and maybe have more figured out about them.
Yeah,
we're just dealing with these Big East teams playing against each other at this point. So,
yeah, I was a couple teams maybe playing better than expected that kind of helped out with that. Greg, we're going to talk about those teams right now, actually. We have some Big East game-winning shots. We have Creighton, Stephen Ashworth, airballs a three, then immediately banks one in to give Creighton the win over Villanova. And then we have St. John's and Providence playing a very close game. Kadari Richmond pulls up from the free throw line, basically, hits a game-winning shot to beat Providence. Again, Providence is not playing well this year. Bryce Hopkins hasn't played much at all. But it is good to get that game-winning shot and not have to lose to Providence as well. So good for St. John's to get that win. Good for Creighton to get that win. That helps the conference in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Joe, the only thing before we kind of hop into our lightning round was everything that was in our top stories either happened on Saturday or had a connection to Saturday, being that, we ended up talking about after one of the Monday or Tuesday games, what happened to their something crazy happened in their next Saturday game. So this Saturday, you're welcome. I put it out. I spoke it into existence. I put it out in the universe. Do you have anything you want for Christmas or anything? I can just randomly text you so that someone will get it for you. I have these powers. Just my Georgia power, my
yeah.
Speaking Saturday, the big Saturday into existence. So if there's anything you ever need, just let me know and I'll text it to someone, and then obviously it'll happen. So, but with great power comes great responsibility. So make sure you ask for something, that would help the world. But anyway, we are like an hour plus in.
Yeah.
We just went through our top stories, so
here we go.
We still got picks to go. Here's the review. All right, let's do it. However you want.
All right, 5 minutes on the clock for all of us. I'm going to start it now. It's a 5-minute timer, and we're just going to do it. A lot of it we have covered, so I will gloss over the week. I will mention the games we already covered, but here we go. We're going to start it now. 5 minutes. We have Monday. We had Iowa State Arizona game where Caleb Love hit that big shot from behind half court, then it's hot in overtime. They win that game. Kentucky beat Tennessee without some of their players on the road. Zakai Ziegler leaves, comes back, and then misses the next game. Kansas narrowly escapes UCF, and then VCU SLU. There's a fight in the stands, which is another minor point of going on here. SLU gets that win, and it looks pretty good in the A-10. Greg, anything so far you want to
add? Kansas was without
DeJuan Harris. Yep.
DeJuan Harris against UCF. It's just weird because they almost lost that game, or they did lose that game last year to UCF. So maybe UCF's just got their number. VCU SLU thing. That is just one of the more, like, the players didn't even know what they were, just looking around like what is going on. There's something going on. The coaches pulled their players like away from the bench.
Yeah.
So they didn't get. Not that they were going to get involved, but just so it didn't spill over into that was a new one for me. That was Malice in the Palace level minus a player getting in the stands.
Oh, yeah. All right, so we still have 3 minutes and 45 seconds to finish this up, Greg. Creighton beat Xavier. Xavier was on a little bit of a hot streak. They lose to Creighton. No shame in that. Creighton's on a little bit of a hot streak themselves. Wisconsin loses to Maryland on the road. Jacoby Gillespie has 16 points and 7 rebounds. Those guards have stepped up in a big way. We have Alabama and Mississippi State. Alabama wins that one. Mississippi State had a pretty rough week. We'll get to another one of their games here in a little bit. And we have Ole Miss narrowly escaping Texas. Greg, anything on those?
Maryland, deservedly ranked. I thought they should have been ranked before this. Good win for them. Bama takes care of business. You said it yourself with the Ole Miss Texas. I don't know if we can trust Texas to win 3 games in a row. I don't know if we can trust Ole Miss to lose 3 games in a row. Exactly what we thought would happen. So thank you for those teams for not giving us another 25-minute segment to talk about from Wednesday.
There we go. All right, so Thursday we have Nebraska beating Illinois in overtime, 80-74. Bryce Williams has 27 points and 8 rebounds for Nebraska. That signifies a big week coming up for Nebraska. We'll talk about their next game here in a little bit. But the team they played in the next game was Oregon. Oregon loses to UCLA, 52-78. UCLA comes out of nowhere, and Oregon not looking good this week. Greg, any thoughts?
Yeah, the Illinois thing, those things happen. It's on the road every once in a while. They're still, regardless of the number next to their name, they're still in the teams that I like category. Oregon, I don't have us picking their game coming up from them this weekend, this week, but I do have Michigan, Oregon. I think it's Wednesday or Thursday this week. That's, I feel like, a pivotal game for both of those programs. Now, we've kind of had a number on Oregon where we've been like, I don't know what to think of them. So if they want to stay the course, I would advise them to win that game.
All right, definitely. So have just under 2 minutes left, Greg, to get through this. We have the Florida-Tennessee game that we mentioned earlier. Florida kind of doesn't show up to this one. Tennessee gets the win again without Milicic or Zakai Ziegler. We have Missouri beating Mississippi State, and they win it pretty easily. Caleb Grill off the bench has a lot of threes in that one. We move on to Auburn, Ole Miss. Auburn wins that one, just the class of the SEC, not too much to add there. Ole Miss was trying to punch above their weight. Michigan State and USC. USC wins this one at home against Michigan State. Eric Musselman talked about a defense they played where they were intentionally leaving players like Cohen Carr open, and that worked to perfection. Houston, Texas Tech, we talked about that one. Texas Tech wins in overtime. We talked about UConn, Marquette. UConn gets that big win. And then Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Gonzaga loses again and kind of puts things in doubt for the future of the season. Yes, they'll make the tournament, but St. Mary's looking like pretty good in the WCC and a very tough WCC this year.
Yeah, just to go in some kind of order, Mizzou looking like they're for real after a terrible season last year. They're looking a lot better in a much stronger SEC. Michigan State drops a game to USC. I think we're still on the same page with them. We just don't know what to think of them. Don't care how many games they won in a row. Their style, don't know how it's going to uphold when we get into March. Maybe they'll win a game or two, but I might pick them to also get upset early. Just going to depend on the context. Gonzaga, St. Mary's, I can't believe with how that Gonzaga looked early in the season, how this thing has gone. It just feels like since they ended up losing that game late to Kentucky, it's just been downhill since then, and they are unable to stop the slide. But St. Mary's looks good, so they're going to, I guess, carry the WCC banner this year.
All right, 10 seconds to finish up what happened Sunday, Greg. We have Nebraska beating Oregon, like we mentioned. Bryce Williams has another big game, 28 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. We have Illinois beating Ohio State. It looks like Kasparas is kind of struggling right now, and then we have Memphis struggling with Rice. That's 5 minutes.
That's enough.
That's enough.
I don't have anything to add to that.
All right, so let's go to the picks for this week. There'll be no timer on this one, Greg. These usually don't take as long because we're just making our picks here. The game that is just tipping off probably right around now, Iowa State and Kansas, the two teams who are struggling in the Big 12. Greg, who you going with?
Yeah, do you want this one is two teams that I had higher expectations for a couple weeks ago, and now it's like they're both struggling. I'm going to take Iowa State on the road. Don't know if that's my best choice. They're still not healthy, but I just, again, they're in that group of teams that I just like, and I like them more than I do Kansas right now, regardless of their most recent results.
Yeah, this is a Kansas pick for me. I trust Bill Self a lot to figure this out. I know it's going to take a lot of changes, but I trust also they have home court advantage in this one. The line has moved to Kansas being favored by 3.5, so I'm going to go with Kansas in this one. The next pick we're going to do, Greg, we have Marquette and St. John's. It is a massive week in the Big East, Greg. Lots of big games here. Who are you going with in this one?
I am going to go with Marquette, and that is just a gut feeling. Mark that down. That's two road teams I'm picking in big games, and I might be about to pick a third. I haven't done my picks yet in totality, so I don't have a ton of analysis. Again, that's just a gut. Which team do I like better? Yeah, it's at St. John's, but I'll take Marquette.
I'm going St. John's. Being at home in this one, Madison Square Garden. Kadari Richmond kind of coming along here for Rick Pitino, and I feel like they're not getting the credit they deserve. I feel like they can still play the chip on their shoulder game. They're 12th in the country. They only have 3 losses. They only have 1 Big East loss. I think they are a team that is not, this game could really help push them over the edge. All right, so next game up, Greg, we have Kentucky and Ole Miss on Tuesday as well.
I am really trying to logic myself one way or the other. I'm thinking, how's that Kentucky offense going to do against that staunch Ole Miss defense? But at the same time, I know that Kentucky defense might give. I just don't know that Ole Miss has what I want to see on offense. I don't know if they have the firepower. So despite their defense, again, with them, I think they're going to be in tons of games. Would not surprise me if this is a close game. But I will take Kentucky, which means that's the KOD for Joe's team again for me. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm going Ole Miss in this one. The defense is a big factor why. They also don't turn over the ball as much. So I think protecting the ball and playing good defense is a good strategy against this Kentucky team that, it needs their offense to be on fire to win these games. Move on to Wednesday. We have Missouri and Tennessee. Missouri after getting that big win against Mississippi State. Tennessee after their up and down week against Kentucky and Florida, but still number 4 in the polls.
I am going to take Tennessee to win this game. Igor Milicic, I believe it was just an illness, a flu-like something, so I would assume he's going to be back. Zakai Ziegler was well enough to finish the second half of the Kentucky game. Yeah, he missed the game this week at Florida, but it looked like they had plenty to beat Florida, so I don't think they missed him all that much, but I would imagine he plays this game, and as much as fun as a Missouri story is, give us a little flavor, little uniqueness to the season, I'll still take Tennessee at home.
I will take Tennessee at home as well. I think one of Gainey or Lanier can step up in this one and kind of give them a little bit more help. It would be fun to know what players are going to be playing, but sight unseen, I'll take the home team here. Next one up, we're going to Friday. Mentioned it's a big week in the Big East. We have St. John's and UConn. This one is at UConn. Greg, Big East standings might be looking a little different after this week.
Yeah, picking against Rick Pitino, who currently is the leader in the clubhouse with St. John's, as far as leading the Big East, feels weird to me to do twice in the same week, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take UConn at home.
Okay.
I don't have a lot else for you. Some of this again is just gut. I can't logic my way one way or the other with these teams, but I'm gonna go with UConn.
I'm going UConn too. I think Liam McNeely being out might be a positive for this team when it's all said and done. Because I do think they found other players to step up, and that's not something that it really was for those weeks after they got back from Maui. It was McNeely being the team. Now they have other guys. So solo ball, see how he plays. Liam McNeely coming back possibly for this game. We'll see. We'll see if we get double texts or double tweets again saying one thing and then the other. But I'm going to go UConn as well. All right, on Saturday, another Big East game. We have Marquette and Creighton. This one's at Creighton.
Marquette. I just Creighton's had some again beat Xavier last week, close one on Saturday. I gotta think this is even on the road. I gotta think this is a game Marquette finishes and pulls out.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm picking Marquette to lose earlier, I got to pick them to win this one. I like Creighton. I like their home court advantage. It's one of the more underrated ones in college basketball. But just some of the injuries they had this year, Pop Isaacs, of course, we miss him. I think might catch up to him, and I think the guard play of Marquette can take over in this one. Florida and Auburn, a game of teams that are very, very good in the SEC. This one is at Auburn.
I mean, I have no reason to pick against Auburn until they lose, so I'll pick Auburn. Sorry, Florida.
I feel like if Florida had beat Tennessee and had played well, I probably would have picked Florida here. I thought, it's hard to say a team will go through without losing another game after the only loss being at Duke. So I'd probably pick them, and I like Florida a lot. But given that that's what we saw against Tennessee, I'm not going against Auburn at home in this one. The Jungle will be rocking for this one. I think Shania Broom will have a big game, and they'll get the win. Texas A&M and Missouri. Greg, we have a lot of Missouri games in this one. They've earned that right. Who you going with in this one?
I'll take the Texas A&M defense, even on the road.
I think that they have more playmakers, and if Wade Taylor doesn't shoot like 10% from the field like he has at different points this season, I think we'll be fine. I think Texas A&M will win. Next one up, Texas Tech and Arizona, two teams who are on the rise in the Big 12.
I don't know if you get the same feeling I do, but does this feel like a game that has the most potential to just be crazy exciting, or is that just a feeling that I'm getting based on the games these teams are both coming off this week?
I don't know.
They're both coming off some wild games and some notable finishes, or other headline reasons. I don't know if that's what's giving me that thought. I'm taking a lot of. I hate doing a lot of the same things, but I'll take Texas Tech on the road. I hate going one way or the other, and it feels like in previous weeks I've picked a lot of home favorites, and it feels like this week I'm picking a lot of road teams, not necessarily favorites or underdogs, but a lot of road teams. I don't like doing that, but I don't know. It's just there's a lot. I think there's a lot of even matchups this week.
There's a lot of even matchups, a lot of good matchups. I'm going Arizona in this one. They're at home. I like what you said, that it could be crazy. This is like a 10 p.m. start time. If you're picking a game that might go to double overtime, it's probably this one. I think what Tommy Lloyd has done is incredible. If it was at Texas Tech, I'd probably pick Texas Tech. I think the teams are that close, but I will go Arizona in this one. All right, Greg, we have a couple games to watch. How do you want to do this one? Should I go down the list again and let you say one word about each of them or whatever? One sentence about each of them like we did last week?
Yeah.
All right. Vanderbilt, Florida, Tuesday.
Vanderbilt gets into the top 25, gets bumped back out. Florida obviously just got roasted by Tennessee, so just might be something to watch. Don't know. I would imagine Florida wins this game, but it might be worth keeping an eye on.
Baylor, Texas Tech, Tuesday.
I feel like it's an important game for both teams, probably more for Baylor, a good opportunity for them to kind of put themselves on the right side. It would be a really good win for them. Texas Tech's playing good ball with like half their team and not their coach. So going to be a long shot to win in Lubbock, but just looks like another fun game. I already mentioned the next one, so you can. I mentioned
okay. So Maryland, Ohio State on Thursday.
Maryland is ranked, but Ohio State has this tendency to do weird things in these games, or Micah Parrish has a tendency to just hit shots. So we'll see. I still like the Maryland inside presence. I will pick them to win this game, but wouldn't surprise me if we came back and we were talking about, hey, Ohio State's on the right track again.
All right, Duke at Clemson's the last one on Saturday.
Clemson, I didn't realize how in the field they are right now. I don't think that occurred to me. This game's at Clemson. Don't forget Clemson picked off Kentucky earlier in the year. Again, that I'm not putting Kentucky and Duke on the same plane, but if funny things are going to happen, it's probably going to be at home and against a team that's already had a weird result. I don't think Duke loses this game, but it could turn into something wild. They struggled with NC State last week, so
if Clemson wins, they're in the lead for the ACC as a result of winning head-to-head against Duke. Also, Greg, Dickie V's first game calling a broadcast in almost 2 years, so 6 o'clock ESPN, even if we don't think the game might be good because Duke might run away with it, there is a chance that things go crazy, and you'll at least have Dickie V there for you. All right, Greg, any final thoughts this week?
I think we have given plenty of thoughts. Why don't you tell the people where to like and follow?
I will. We've only gone about an hour and 26 minutes. So, all right. So we have. I want to remind everyone to like and subscribe to the podcast. You can do that Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to us. Also, leave us a review. That'll help us as we go along. And then also remember to like and subscribe on the Gamehouse YouTube channel. The Gamehouse YouTube channel is growing as we talk right now. It is getting a lot bigger, and we are excited for it. So make sure to help us out with that. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.